problems that they almost need someone who has the ability to be a general counsel in their field, to have an understanding of all those areas. Kind of like a doctor who's a dermatologist or a psychologist with a clinical basis of a number of systems that other people who work on feet and arms and legs wouldn't know. So I do think we're now emerging into the field where there is the possibility, and I think you're going to see more and more of it, that sports lawyers are going to be specifically sports lawyers. So if you're interested in that career, I think you're in the vanguard. You may have to convince the industry of that over the next couple of years, and that's a long road sometimes. You know, convincing yourself that you're right is easy. Convincing the industry harder sometimes. But I do believe you have the possibility of doing that. If that's something you're interested in, it's out there. And I think, again, it's complexity. Okay, so now I'm on to the crisis, something about sports. And we are in a major crisis. This summer was clearly, to paraphrase Dickens, the summer of our discontent. Vick and the whole player conduct issue bubbled up. First time in the history of sports that we can think of, a star player, a face of the league player, was faced with serious jail time during their playing career. And in the NFL, the Cincinnati Bengals had 9 of 53 players arrested. That's 20%. I always use this stat at NYU. We have 51,000 students at NYU. That's 11,000 arrests on the same percentage basis. That's a heck of a party. The NBA referee betting scandal seems to be localized, but doesn't that call into question the very integrity of the game? And isn't it a betting scandal in 1919 that starts, well, it gives Fitzgerald a basis for writing part of The Great Gatsby. It gives the creation of the office of the commissioner, a pope of sports, if you will, for lack of it, an all-powerful, all-omniscient, powerful being to take care of sports. And isn't that the one thing all the sports leagues have feared ever since? A betting scandal, that our games become fixed and we become the World Wrestling Federation. But you're just hearing this pro wrestling, not real. Okay. And then the most sacred record. There used to be 3 things that all sports fans knew. They knew who the world's fastest human was, who won the Olympic 100. They knew who the heavyweight champion of the world was, and they knew who the home run king of baseball was. If you were a sports fan, you knew those 3 things. Talk about complexity. Answer that question for me now. Who's the heavyweight champion of the world? Even my students who are master students in sports give me the best idea. Some guy named Klitschko, we're not sure which one. Who's the world's fastest human? Yeah, you're all shaking your head. Is this pre-drug test or post-drug test? And who's the home run king of baseball? Yeah, okay, right. We now have an asterisk marking that. We have anti-popes here. Okay, so that record is gone, and that was our summer. That was a month of the summer. Fall hasn't been a lot better. Madison Square Garden has been hit with a monster sex harassment scandal, and Marion Jones drug testing revelations, or drug use revelations, have come out. So we've implicated probably the most dominant female athlete of recent years, and the most valuable sports property out there in Madison Square Garden. I say this to you only from this perspective, and I come back to the Madison Square Garden, and I'll dwell on it for a second, why it might be the most serious. Sports leagues and sports companies are essentially, even though you might own the San Antonio Spurs or the Detroit Pistons, they're essentially a subdivision if you think about it. Their fates are inextricably linked to one another. So if you own the Detroit Pistons, is bad stuff happening to the Knicks your problem? Yeah, no, maybe. Anybody in the yes column? Anybody in the no column? Anybody with no opinion? All right. Why is it a problem if Madison Square Garden, the New York property, is the one that's not performing well? If you're the NBA and you're another team, you share revenue from your television deal equally. New York is twice as large a market as any other television market in the United States. It's 2 times Los Angeles, roughly. Now, I'm not saying this because I happen to work in New York, or that New York is the most diverse or the best place in the world. I'll leave that to people to make value judgments. It's the biggest. You want to perform in the biggest. If you're not pulling ratings in the biggest market, there's something wrong with your revenue model, and I describe it to you this way. Imagine if you lived in a subdivision that the biggest house, the one on the road that you came in on, had like, you know, it was messed up, the windows were blown out, and they were out there in the wife beater t-shirts doing stuff on the lawn, and there were cars up on blocks on that lawn. It wouldn't matter how nice your house is in the third row of that subdivision, and how wonderful it is, and how well manicured your lawn is, if you had to drive by these people. And I'm not sure the Dolan family in Madison Square Garden isn't the equivalent of like, you know, a call from the TV show Cops Away. And I think they're hurting the value of all sports franchises. And that's one of the things that's interconnected about sports. But it's a crisis defined. And we're in a crisis in sports, I think. I think sports can be saved, and I think some of you in this room may be the answer in saving that. But here's where I'm defining a crisis. We began on a 30-year spiral. And that 30-year spiral began when we decided that people and our stars and our athletes needed a little attitude. We needed to punch things up. Roger Staubach, boring. The heroes of the 50s, we thought